Video captured last night shows fireworks being set off near Bloor and Christie, despite a major police presence in the area. We'll tell you more about what happened. New inflation data is out, and Canada's annual inflation rate slowed to a 3-year low last month. We'll take a look at what that means for the upcoming interest rate announcement. Plus, Leafs management have officially introduced the team's newest head coach, Craig Berube. He addressed the media today for the first time since getting the job. We'll tell you more about that. Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. I'm Lena Latifat. Our top story this hour. Video from the Christie Pits area last night shows fireworks being shot along a stretch of Bloor, all in the presence of police. CP24's Beatrice Faisman has been following the story very closely, and she joins us live with the very latest. Questions about that police presence, Beatrice?
And we haven't been able to get a lot of answers from police. Lena, I've gone back to them again just now to ask what happened. Why was this allowed to go on over the span of 2 hours? Started around 9 p.m., went on until 11 p.m. And that's when police admit to CP24 they finally cleared the park and this area. But the video, it speaks for itself. I mean, people, groups shooting Roman candles and fireworks at one another. These are not being shot into the sky. They are being shot at body level, and they're being fired across one of these cities' main arteries as well, Bloor Street, just east of Christie Pits Park. Fireworks flying across Bloor Street as vehicles were kind of weaving in between, and lots of pedestrians packing the sidewalk as well. Keep in mind, Holiday Monday, people out and about enjoying it, and witnesses tell CP24 that there were people that were jumping into restaurants, into ice cream shops along this stretch of Bloor just to get out of harm's way. Now, police underscore the fact that there were no injuries in this, but the fact that there are no injuries is not because of the actions of Toronto police. It's because, by the grace of God, by a miracle, there was no one struck by a firework. That's very different than what happened in this area back in 2018 when a teenager suffered pretty significant injuries after he was hit in the eye by one of these fireworks, Lena. So again, no injuries last night, thankfully. And police also adding no arrests were made, though they say they confiscated a bag of fireworks here in this area. When talking to witnesses, here's what two of them told CP24 about what they saw.
Some people were running, other people's were like kind of peeking out from restaurants, kind of trying to figure out like what's going on, because you shouldn't, like, they were so loud, like it was closer than, like, if you're standing at a park watching fireworks, it's not that loud. Like, you could hear the colors and see the colors on the main street. Like, that's uncalled for.
Large concern for public safety. And again, the police were here, but, their presence seemed more for crowd control than anything else.
What did you see them doing?
The police? Mostly blocking off the streets. They weren't necessarily chasing after any individuals with fireworks. But again, I don't think that was really their goal last night.
I also heard from Noah and one other gentleman that there was a similar scenario play out last year, the same holiday, Lena. That year, though, there was a higher police presence. These people who live here in this community tell me that there was the riot police out, in the public order unit was out. They weren't out yesterday. We saw a video of some officers kind of standing around, confiscating some fireworks, some of these Roman candles shot at a police cruiser, and backup was called in from 51 and 52 Division. So again, lots of questions for police. We'll see if they give us any answers today, Lena.
All right, CP24's Beatrice Faisman reporting live. Police have made an arrest in a West End stabbing. Officers responded to Martin Goodman Trail, that's just west of Colburn Lodge Drive, around 10:45 last night. They found a man in his 30s suffering from stab wounds. He was taken to hospital, but it's not yet clear how seriously he was injured. Police say a second victim walked into hospital. His injuries are not considered life-threatening. Police tell CP24 a suspect has now been arrested and charged. And police have released the description of a suspect in a stabbing last night in Scarborough. This happened around 8:30 Melford Drive and Tapscott Road. That is south of Finch. Paramedics say the victim was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Police say the suspect is in his 30s with long dreadlocks and was wearing blue jeans and a red shirt. Well, arrests have been made after an early morning break-in and car theft in North York. Toronto police say suspects broke into a home near Yonge and Steeles around 5:30 this morning and stole a vehicle. They were later located in Markham near Warden and Denison Street, where officers made the arrests. No injuries were reported, and police say the investigation continues. In Peel Region, the search continues for a suspect in a fatal stabbing at a Mississauga motel. It happened in the area of Britannia and Whittle Road. That's just east of here, Ontario. Police say a woman in her 50s was found in a motel room around 9:30 yesterday morning. The victim and suspect are known to each other, but police say it is not a case of intimate partner violence. And police are trying to identify a suspect after a woman was allegedly sexually assaulted on a TTC bus. Investigators have released these pictures of the man they're looking for. They say the suspect sexually assaulted a woman on a bus in the Markham Road and Eglinton Avenue area on May 2nd. The man is described as 50 to 60 years old, 5'6" with a medium build. He was wearing a jacket with a fur-lined hood. Anybody with information is asked to call police or Crime Stoppers. And police have released images of a suspect wanted in a downtown arson. Investigators are searching for this man, described as 25 to 35 years old. He was last seen wearing a green hooded sweater, dark-colored jacket, black shoes, and carrying a black backpack and trolley bag. Police say on May 15th, the suspect used a lighter and accelerant to set cardboard on fire near a building in the laneway near Yonge and Elm Streets. Anybody with information is asked to get in touch. Notorious serial killer Robert Pickton was injured in what is being described as a major assault at a Quebec prison over the weekend. Correctional Service Canada has confirmed his involvement in the incident on Sunday. Quebec Provincial Police say the 74-year-old was taken to hospital with injuries that are considered life-threatening. The remains or DNA of 33 women were found at his pig farm in BC. He was convicted of 6 murders back in 2007. He was also charged in 20 other killings but did not face trial. Police are continuing to investigate this assault. A new report suggests Canada's homeless shelters are not designed to meet the needs of older adults who are unhoused. The paper, published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, says shelters do not have essential supports for seniors, including medication shortages. Its lead author says seniors with mobility issues are also at increased risk of falling, and those with cognitive impairments are more likely to be victimized in shelters. She says measures are needed to prevent seniors from becoming homeless in the first place, including supportive housing. And staying with healthcare, measles, that continues to be a major concern here in the GTA. Infectious diseases specialist at Toronto General Hospital, Dr. Isaac Bogosh, says vaccinations are the best defense to protecting Canadians against the disease.
Horrible to hear. I think the big takeaways are that, obviously we know that we have a measles vaccine. It's safe, it's free, it's widely available, and it's very effective, and we should really be taking steps to lower barriers to vaccination. We know many people might have missed a dose of a vaccine throughout the pandemic. We know people might be choosing not to vaccinate themselves for various reasons, and we really need to improve our efforts on outreach, communication, and lowering barriers to vaccination such that when people are presented with the option of vaccination, they take the right choice and vaccinate.
Measles symptoms include a rash, red eyes, fever, cough, and runny nose. Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is south of the border today to take part in a major union conference. He is visiting Philadelphia to address the Service Employees International Union's North American Convention. The Prime Minister's office says he will highlight the work Canada is doing to create middle-class jobs and opportunities for workers. He is also set to meet with American business leaders while in Pennsylvania to discuss areas for investment and trade collaboration. And CTV's political commentator Scott Reed joined us with more on the political implications his visit may have on relations with former U.S. President Donald Trump.
I think there's a whole pile of interesting things about this. First of all, when I worked for the Prime Minister and you would go to the States, there was always kind of use a sports analogy, a home-away psychology, right? So something for home and something for away. So away, we know what away is. Away is all about, Donald Trump says if he gets reelected, a 10% tariff right across the board. Plus, he's got his eye on tearing up free trade. Plus, of course, he more or less wants to turn the world, into a flaming cork. So we got to be worried about that. Talking to governors, talking to business people down there that can influence Trump, somebody that might possibly have his ear and could slow him down if he's elected president.
Trump has promised to introduce a 10% flat import tax if elected. Well, one person has died in severe turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight. The plane was traveling from London to Singapore with 211 passengers and 18 crew on board when it was forced to divert to Bangkok. The airline confirms one fatality and as many as 30 others were injured. To sports news now, the Toronto Maple Leafs have formally introduced Craig Berube as the team's new head coach. The 58-year-old replaces Sheldon Keefe, who was fired following another first-round playoff exit. Berube comes to Toronto after spending 6 seasons as the head coach of the St. Louis Blues, where he led the club to a Stanley Cup in 2019. He is the 32nd head coach in Leafs history.
It's a huge honor, obviously. Great franchise, original 6. I had the opportunity to play here for a little bit way back in the day, and it's nothing but first class here in a first-class organization, and I'm very honored to be the head coach.
We're excited today to formally announce and introduce Craig Berube. Just to walk you through a short timeline and process here. It was almost 2 weeks ago, I guess, or just under 2 weeks ago that we sat here in front of you in our year-end press conference, and obviously I said at that time that the top priority was to find the next coach and the new head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
It was some of the players that we reached out to that have played for him, and it was first liners, it was fourth liners, it was Canadian guys, it was European guys, players that played different styles and had different backgrounds, and yet they all came back to us with the same message, that he's a great coach, a great person, and as Brad said, I'd go through a wall for the guy.
Berube played more than 1,000 games in the NHL between 1986 and 2003, and is 7th all-time with over 3,000 penalty minutes. Well, the Jays will see if they can clinch a series win in their second game against the Chicago White Sox.
Whoa, this is going to play as well. Long way to left, and it's gone.
The Blue Jays bats set off some Victoria Day fireworks at home against the White Sox. Danny Jansen provided a power surge for the Jays, hitting a 2-run homer in the 7th inning. He drove in 5 runs. Bo Bichette went 4 for 4 at the plate, and Jose Barrios picked up the win after pitching 6 solid innings. The Jays won 9-3. The second game of the series that gets going just after 7 o'clock tonight. Well, a day to remember this weekend for 2 golfers in Saskatchewan.
Many people golf their whole life and don't get one, so I was pretty fortunate to get one. Like I said, year 4 or 5 of actually golfing consistently, I was pretty fortunate to get one that early.
16-year-old Grady McDougall made an ace on the par 4 6th hole. Grady's former gym teacher, Reed, was also out for a round that day on the same course. Reed hit his first ever hole in one on the 17th hole. WNBA rookie Caitlin Clark has signed a multi-year deal with Wilson Sporting Goods to launch her own signature basketball collection. She becomes the first athlete since Michael Jordan to be given the signature treatment by Wilson. The 22-year-old will become a brand ambassador, testing and providing feedback on a range of gear. The University of Iowa standout recently signed an 8-year deal with Nike worth $28 million. Clark was the #1 overall pick in the WNBA draft. It is 12:14, 23 degrees. Let's talk about that drive now. Send things over to Adjoa and Bois. Good afternoon, Adj.
Oh, good afternoon, Lena. And we are dealing with a couple of problems for this very busy afternoon. It's a sticky one out there. Hopefully your AC is working. But if you're stuck in the car and you're on the eastbound lanes of the 401, this is right around Victoria Park. You will find just at Victoria Park, they blocked the exit ramp and the right lane in the collectors because of this collision. Again, creating delays already from the 427. Then on the westbound lanes of the 401, looks like problems cleared. We had some problems at the 412. Collision had the left lane blocked. That situation is all out of the way, but the backlog fog is still there because the situation cleared moments ago. And the DVP, not the place to be if you're headed northbound. The grass cutting crew is still there. They're north of Bayview Bloor. They are going very slowly in that right lane, and it's creating quite the delay from well before Bayview Bloor. Outside of camera view, getting rid of a collision on Yonge right at Finch. I'll send it back to you, Lena.
Adjoa, thanks so much. And coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, we'll talk to a Middle East politics professor about the International Criminal Court prosecuting Israeli and Hamas leaders over the war. Stay with us. Welcome back. The International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense chief, as well as 3 Hamas leaders. For a closer look at these stunning developments, we are joined live now by Nader Hashimi, who teaches Middle East politics at Georgetown University. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. Everything about this seems unprecedented. Hamas has already been declared a terror group in the West, so that part might not be surprising, but it's the Netanyahu piece that is creating a lot of controversy. Your reaction to Benjamin Netanyahu being accused of crimes against humanity, and what did you make of his response?
Well, anyone who's been following the situation in Gaza since October the 7th, following the human rights documentation and the horrific human rights crisis and humanitarian crisis there, would have to agree that the arrest warrant, based on a very careful examination of what Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing in Gaza, merits these types of charges. Now, if Benjamin Netanyahu and his supporters believe that they are innocent of the charges, then they can simply go to the court and defend themselves. That would seem to be perfectly realistic. In terms of Netanyahu's response, it's completely an unhinged and hysterical response. It reminds me of someone who has never been held accountable before for any political conduct, particularly with respect to the treatment of the Palestinians. And now there's an attempt to hold Netanyahu accountable, and he engages in this very sort of unhinged sort of response. I mean, one of the things that stood out for me when I was listening to his remarks yesterday was where he called the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, quote, one of the great anti-Semites in human history. That's unhinged. That's not to be taken, I think, seriously. And I think the fact that more Western leaders are not calling him out for these remarks just makes the situation much more difficult and undermines the whole question of international law and what's called a rules-based order.
You know, the reaction has been so mixed, and I want to get to that, because it ties in nicely to what you just said. There are many who would disagree with you. We just heard from U.S. President Joe Biden, who has slammed the court's efforts, calling them outrageous. We are hearing from some other allies, though. In a statement last night, France said it supports the International Criminal Court. I want to bring it back to Canada. How do you expect our Foreign Affairs Minister and our Prime Minister to respond to these developments?
Well, those of us who have studied Canadian foreign policy toward the Middle East know that there's not really a foreign policy that Canada can speak of toward the Middle East. It's really a domestic policy. And what I mean by that is that Canadian governments sort of take very close measure of how this is going to play out domestically within Canada, and then they try and sort of tailor their response accordingly. So that, I think, is going to be one impulse that will shape Canada's reaction. The other impulse will be Canada's sort of stated record. You know, Canada played a significant role in the establishment of the International Criminal Court. We like to claim that we are a country that supports international law. So I think Canada, the Trudeau government is going to be sort of torn between those two fundamental impulses. I just want to say a word about, Joe Biden's reaction, where he said it's completely outrageous. Right. If Joe Biden himself last December said that Israel was engaged in, quote, indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. A few weeks ago, he gave an interview to CNN where he said that Israel was, using weapons to, quote, attack civilians in population centers. By Joe Biden's own words, those are war crimes that should be prosecuted. What Joe Biden and other, people here in the United States are really saying is that they don't believe in a rules-based order. They believe that only those countries that are enemies of the United States should be prosecuted for war crimes, Vladimir Putin, but not America's friends and allies. And that's not a moral position that anyone can defend. That's a definition of a hypocritical position.
Professor, I'm going to jump in here because I've run out of time, but I do want to ask you this. What do you say to people who say to place Hamas and the Prime Minister of a democratic country on the same playing field is horrific? How do you respond to that? And very quickly, are there any implications here if the ICC were to grant arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister?
Well, that's just a cheap talking point. No one is comparing Hamas to the Israeli government. They're comparing war crimes and crimes against humanity based on the statutes of international law. And so if you don't want to be accused of war crimes, then you shouldn't commit them in the first place. And so both Hamas and Israel are being judged according to the laws of the Rome Statute, that is the founding document of the International Criminal Court. Implications for Netanyahu, well, he's freaking out because now he can no longer travel to countries that have signed the International Criminal Court, document. So I think he's upset about that. That's going to be an implication. But I think much more importantly, Netanyahu, all authoritarian and repressive leaders don't want to be held accountable for their actions. And the fact that that's happening is, I think, the real reason why people like Netanyahu and his supporters in North America are very upset today.
Nader Hashemi, teacher and professor of Middle East politics at Georgetown University, we want to thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you.
And coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, we are going to take a look at what new inflation rate dates mean for the upcoming interest rate announcement. Stay with us. Welcome back. Canada's annual inflation rate slowed to a 3-year low last month. The central bank is scheduled to make its next interest rate announcement on June 5th. And for more on the implications of the new inflation rate data on the upcoming interest rate announcement, all eyes on that, of course. We're joined live now by Alan Small, Senior Investment Advisor at the Alan Small Financial Group. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. How encouraged are you by these latest numbers?
Very encouraged. I think definitely we continue to go in the right direction. The question now becomes, is this enough for the Bank of Canada to cut rates in June? I know we're going to get some more economic data at the end of May, and that could be the telltale as to whether or not we see a cut in June, or perhaps the Bank of Canada will want to see one more month's worth of economic data and then cut in July. I think it's a bit of a coin toss at this point whether they cut rates on June 5th or not. But definitely we're going in the right direction. And I think if the economic data at the end of the month shows some further slowdown in growth, then I think that would lead the Bank of Canada to more of a chance for the Bank of Canada to cut rates in June.
Yeah, a lot of people have a variable rate mortgage, and they're watching very anxiously. They're waiting to see how this plays out. How are you advising lenders right now who are dealing with a lot of debt?
And that's a problem we're seeing for many. A lot of Canadians carrying a lot more debt than they have in the past. Now close to about $1.80 for every dollar that they're making now they have of debt. And so what I'm telling people is, even if they do cut rates in June or July, maybe they'll cut a couple of times before the end of the year, 2-3 times. Debt is still, or interest carrying costs on your debt are still pretty high. And you're probably going to see that interest rates will remain high, perhaps maybe 1 or 2 cuts. But overall, I think interest rates will remain high, at least in the near term. And so I think we just have to continue to be prepared to be paying these higher rates for longer as yet. A quarter point might make a difference for an individual who has a mortgage that they're paying interest on, of course. But it's probably not going to make a huge difference, at least not initially. And so I think Canadians in general need to expect that rates will remain high. Keep in mind the Bank of Canada is keeping rates high for that reason of housing. They don't want to see everybody just flocking back into the housing market and causing prices to go higher once again. So I think the number one worry for the Bank of Canada is housing. And so they're going to be very careful to cut rates. If they do cut rates, to do it quite slowly.
Yeah, I think you're very right in saying that this isn't going to happen overnight, but we keep talking about relief, and that's because people need it so badly. How long, Alan, before you think we're going to start to feel that much-needed reprieve?
Well, I'm hopeful that we could start to feel something either by year end or early into 25, maybe mid 25. I think if they do cut 3, 4, times between now and, let's say, next spring, that could mean, 1% off a mortgage rate. And if you are a variable rate mortgage, you'll be able to take advantage of that, which many people are. So I think you're probably, I guess, realistically, another, by next spring, if there is maybe 3 or 4 cuts, I think that's when you could probably see a significant difference in some of the interest costs that people are making.
Okay, interesting stuff, and we know you'll be watching really closely. Alan Small, Senior Investment Advisor at the Alan Small Financial Group. Good to have you on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next on CP24, live at noon, video captured last night shows fireworks being set off near Bloor and Christie, despite major police presence in the area. We're asking police about that. Stay with us for more. Video captured last night shows fireworks being set off near Bloor and Christie, despite a major police presence in the area. Stay with us for more on that. 1 person is dead and as many as 30 people injured following severe turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight. We're going to talk to an aviation expert about what happened. And Leafs management have officially introduced the team's newest head coach, Craig Berube. He addressed the media today for the first time since getting the job. Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. Thanks for being here. I'm Lena Ladafat. Video from the Christie Pits area last night shows fireworks being shot along a stretch of Bloor and in the presence of police. CP24's Beatrice Faisman is following the story and joins us live with the latest on what police are saying and what they're not saying. Beatrice.
They're not saying more than they are saying, Lena. Let's be honest here. I mean, the video speaks for itself. It shows a massive police presence, lots of officers, first on bikes, walking around, several, about half a dozen police cruisers at least visible in the video that was shot by our freelance videographer last night. This was going on. This chaos was going on for about 2 hours, from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. last night. That's when police say they finally cleared not only the park, but the area around it. Police saying that there was about 700 people in Christie Pits Park enjoying the nice weather when at around 9 o'clock, people started to sporadically start firing off these fireworks. And the video is quite clear. You see individuals and groups of people shooting Roman candles and fireworks at body level, I should add, at one another, also firing them across Bloor Street as vehicles drive by. The sidewalks also full of people on that beautiful Monday long weekend. And we're told by witnesses that people on the street started to jump into restaurants, into ice cream shops along the strip of Bloor to get out of harm's way. Thankfully, no one was injured in this, but we're also hearing from police no arrests were made, and it comes despite the fact that just a few days ago, before the long weekend, police issued a warning to people. This was out in Ashbridges Bay where the city's firework display happened. They said if you shoot off fireworks, by the way, they're illegal in public places in the city of Toronto, there will be consequences. Well, there were none last night. Here's some reaction from some of the witnesses that we've been chatting with, people who live along the stretch of Bloor, who told us what they saw and heard last night and what they didn't see.
What I saw was a bunch of teenagers and kids just running up and down Bloor, kind of shooting fireworks at each other, and also people walking by. So it was really quiet for a Victoria Day, and then you would just hear fireworks being shot, but so close and see the colors, so you knew it wasn't far off. So when I looked out the window, it was just kids running up and down, shooting each other with fireworks, shooting at people, and a lot of smoke.
Police on bicycles and on foot, but kids are going around shooting off Roman candles at each other. Second year in a row that it's happened, and still there's, I want to say, no preventative measure in place to really stop it from happening again.
Were you surprised to see officers not moving in when they're firing them across Bloor Street?
I was a little bit, but again, I think that their goal was crowd control more than anything else. So for them to chase after individuals for shooting off Roman candles, I guess it wasn't deemed worthwhile.
Police telling CP24 they confiscated a bag of fireworks. But again, it looks like officers might have just been outnumbered, Lena. If you look at police cruisers, they've all got a number on them. The ones that say 14, whatever, that's the local division, 14 division. By the way, fireworks were fired at one of these staff sergeant vehicles from 14 division. Other vehicles, though, they've got numbers starting with 51 and 52, which means backup was called in from 51 division and 52 division as well. Police saying they're not going to be speaking on camera about this situation, Lena.
All right, Beatrice Faisman reporting live. Well, police have made an arrest in a West End stabbing today. Officers were called to Martin Goodman Trail, just west of Colburn Lodge Drive, around 10:45 last night. They found a man in his 30s suffering from stab wounds. He was taken to hospital, but it's not clear how seriously he was hurt. Police say a second victim walked into hospital, and his injuries are considered non-life-threatening. Police tell CP24 a suspect has now been arrested and charged. And police have released the description of a suspect in a stabbing last night in Scarborough. It happened around 8:30 at Melford Drive and Tapscott Road. That is south of Finch. Paramedics say the victim was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Police say the suspect is in his 30s with long dreadlocks and was wearing blue jeans and a red shirt. Arrests have been made after an early morning break-in and car theft in North York. Toronto police say suspects broke into a home near Yonge and Steeles around 5:30 this morning and stole a vehicle. They were later located in Markham near Warden and Denison Street, where officers made the arrests. No injuries were reported, and police say the investigation is ongoing. Well, the search continues for a suspect in a fatal stabbing at a Mississauga motel. It happened in the area of Britannia and Whittle Road. That's just east of here, Ontario. Police say a woman in her 50s was found in a motel room around 9:30 yesterday morning. The victim and suspect are known to each other, but police say it is not a case of intimate partner violence. And police are trying to identify a suspect after a woman was allegedly sexually assaulted on a TTC bus. Investigators have released these photos of the man they're looking for. They say the suspect sexually assaulted a woman on a bus in the Markham Road and Eglinton Avenue area on May 2nd. The man is described as 50 to 60 years old, 5'6" with a medium build. He was wearing a jacket with a fur-lined hood. Anybody with information is asked to call police or Crime Stoppers. Police have released images of a suspect wanted in a downtown arson. Investigators are searching for this man, described as 25 to 35 years old. He was last seen wearing a green hooded sweater, dark-colored jacket, black shoes, and carrying a black backpack and trolley bag. Police say on May 15th, the suspect used a lighter and accelerant to set cardboard on fire near a building in a laneway near Yonge and Elm. Anybody with information is asked to come forward. And we are following developing national news. Notorious serial killer Robert Pickton was injured in what is being described as a major assault at a Quebec prison over the weekend. Here's what we can tell you. Correctional Service Canada has confirmed his involvement in the incident on Sunday. Quebec provincial police say the 74-year-old was taken to hospital with injuries that are considered life-threatening. The remains or DNA of 33 women were found at Pickton's pig farm in BC. He was convicted of 6 murders back in 2007. He was charged in 20 other killings but did not face trial. Police are continuing to investigate the assault. A new report suggests Canada's homeless shelters are not designed to meet the needs of older adults who are unhoused. The paper, published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, says shelters do not have essential supports for seniors, including medication shortages. Its lead author says seniors with mobility issues are also at increased risk of falling, and those with cognitive impairments are more likely to be victimized in shelters. She says measures are needed to prevent seniors from becoming homeless in the first place, including supportive housing. Measles continues to be a major concern in the GTA. Infectious diseases specialist at Toronto General Hospital, Dr. Isaac Bogosh, says the majority of measles cases are travel-related.
Now, the real thing that we can do here, the tangible effort that we can make, is to ensure that everyone who's eligible for measles vaccines and other routine childhood vaccines get those vaccines, such that when they travel abroad, they're not going to get these infections, get sick, and bring them home. Obviously, we'll have others who will travel to Canada who might bring this infection with them. And again, if we have high rates of vaccination, the goal here is, even though we'll see inevitable imported cases because of the large global resurgence of measles, the goal should be no onward transmission because we have high rates of vaccination.
Measles symptoms include a rash, red eyes, fever, cough, and runny nose. It is 12:40 now, 24 degrees. Let's get a check on how that lunchtime drive is going. Adjoa keeping a close eye on that.
It's a busy one, so if you're trying to get to your lunch plans early, it's going to take you a while if you're a commuter on the 401 eastbound, because here's what's going on. This is the eastbound lanes of the 401 right through Victoria Park. Ongoing multi-vehicle collision. It looks like if you're in the collectors, just one center lane getting by, and there is no access to the exit ramp that takes you to Victoria Park. Traffic already moving quite slowly from the 427. Then on the southbound lanes of the 427 on the approach to Rathburn in the Express, crews dealing with a collision there. It's in the left lane. More problems involving a collision. Ooh, this one is not a good one. Two cars collided with each other, and it's on the westbound lanes of the Gardner past Park Lawn. Right lane and shoulder is blocked. They're just trying to hook these vehicles up to tow and get them off the highway. And it's really, really busy as well as you try to get out of the downtown core. And we are still dealing with a slow-moving grass-cutting crew. They're just a wee bit out of camera view, but they are blocking that right lane and shoulder, and now they're on their way to Don Mills. So it is a busy afternoon. On city streets, crews on scene of a collision blocking lanes on Leslie right at the lakeshore. I'll send it back to you, Lena.
The CP24 traffic report is brought to you by CapitalDirect.ca.
Thank you, Adjoa. Coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, we are going to talk to CTV's aviation specialist, Phil Dirty, about deadly turbulence on a flight from London to Singapore. Stay with us. One person has died in severe turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight. The plane was traveling from London to Singapore with 211 passengers and 18 crew on board when it was forced to divert to Bangkok. The airline confirms one fatality and as many as 30 others were injured. And for a closer look at this, we're joined live by CTV News aviation specialist Phil Dirty. Phil, thank you for joining us. This is an anxious flyer's worst nightmare. Regular turbulence we're all used to, totally normal, but this is anything but. What do you think happened?
Yeah, good afternoon, Lena. Well, I was checking on the radars and looking at the weather conditions in the area. There are some thunderstorms in that area. Some of them are topping out at about 50,000 feet, but the pilots would generally fly around those. One of the things is there was 6 other aircraft in that vicinity, so I don't know why they weren't affected by the turbulence, but it was clear air turbulence and it was pretty devastating.
How much or how little notice do you think the pilot had in this scenario?
Well, by gauging the pictures, the flight attendants were actually serving breakfast when the turbulence hit. So obviously the pilots did not have any warning that it was coming. Usually we can forecast where the turbulence will happen, and so we can either fly above it or fly below it. So at that point in time, they didn't know what was happening, and they got hit with a downdraft.
Wow, Phil, was any of this avoidable? How are planes supposed to handle turbulence? What does the protocol look like?
Well, in the design phase of the aircraft, they analyze what the worst conditions that an aircraft could fly into. And what they do is they design to 150% of that specification. So the aircraft are designed to take severe turbulence. The whole airplane is structurally sound. With this aircraft, they're going to have it down on the ground for a while to go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure there was no internal damage caused by the turbulence.
Can you talk about how rare this is, a passenger dying from turbulence?
Well, it wasn't. It was attributed to a heart attack, from what the reporting is right now. So it wasn't actually the actual impact of the turbulence itself. Right. A lot of times you'll see flight attendants with broken limbs, neck injuries, back injuries. That's because the aircraft basically drops out of the sky. It just falls. And when that does happen, anybody that's not strapped in or standing up goes and hits the ceiling. So you're looking at the pictures of the aircraft. You can see there were several points where the passengers impacted the ceiling and the flight attendants as well.
Right, and 18 people injured too, Phil. Is there a takeaway for passengers here?
100%. Wear your seatbelt at all times. Doesn't matter if it's a nice clear day. Just keep your seatbelt on your hips. Make sure it's done up, not too tight, and that'll just stop you from hitting the overhead bins.
Okay, CTV News aviation specialist Phil Dirty, thanks so much for breaking this down for us. So tragic.
Great. Thanks, Lena.
Coming up next on CP24 Live at Noon, we are going to check in with TSN Radio's Matt Cauz about the Leafs officially introducing the team's next coach. Stay with us.
In the past, to be honest with you, I'm focused on now and the future, and I'm going to obviously bring my own style here and how we want to play the game. And again, Brad and Brendan are on board with that. They think a lot similar to myself, and so all I can do is focus on now and going forward, how we want to build the team here and how we want to look on the ice.
And the Leafs have formally introduced Craig Berube as the team's new head coach. He addressed the media today for the first time since getting the job. And for more on this, we're joined live by TSN Radio's Matt Cauz. Always good to see you, Matt. Thanks for joining us. So this was Coach Berube's first press conference in Toronto. He says he's excited. He's already spoken with all the players. What did you think?
Yeah, it was your pretty standard boilerplate coach introduction. Come out, be excited, mention how, from Canada and from the area and honored to be a part of the Maple Leafs. He briefly played for Toronto back in the day, talks about his style, and then also more importantly says, I'm not here to focus on the past, because if we look at the Maple Leafs past in the playoffs, it's not very good. So yeah, he hit all the notes. Treliving did his job, a fairly standard one. He wasn't going to get into specifics. There wasn't going to be any conversation about what coaches could be brought in, what coaches might lose their job, and of course, what happens to the roster. But all in all, your standard coach interview.
Yeah, pretty standard. You talked about his coaching style. I do want to pick up on that because that was brought up. A question about his coaching style. He's known to hold players accountable. And that question was asked. How do you do that in a constructive, positive way? And he said, I'm going to tell them when they're playing well, and I'm going to tell them when they're not playing well. Is that going to be a strength or a weakness?
Oh, it's absolutely going to be a strength. I mean, it's one thing this team, like a lot of teams require, is you need to have that accountability. You have to be able to do your job. And you have to know that the coach, if you don't do your job, you're going to lose minutes. And in the end, that's the main thing that speaks to players. How much ice time are you getting? Because eventually you want that next contract. You want to put up those numbers. You're not going to get it if you're stapled to the bench. And also, this is a coach they're going to listen to. He's played over 1,000 games. He's had tons of fights. He's had big moments. He won a Stanley Cup in 2019 with St. Louis. This is a been there, done that coach for a group of players that have not really been there, and they've not done that.
Matt, this is really interesting. I want to get your take on this. It came up this morning. Craig Berube and Brendan Shanahan, they have history on the ice. They were asked about that.
Oh, yeah, it was hilarious. And they were showing footage of them. They used to fight back in the day. And the funny thing is, I think Shanahan was a little sheepish about it, because you look at the old footage when you're 19, 20 years old, and you think, wait a minute, was that really me? Did I do that? Look at my hair color. I was in much better shape back then. But yeah, it was a very funny moment showing the two of them punching each other on the ice. And now they're working together for a very similar goal. And the interesting thing is, both those guys, them as players, are very different from what we've seen from a lot of current Maple Leaf players in the playoffs. They don't look anything like what Berube looked like in his prime, and certainly not what Brendan Shanahan did.
Okay, so when it comes to moving forward and getting this team back on track, Matt, what do you think this new coach's biggest challenges will be?
The biggest challenge, without a doubt, is two things. One, in net. Is Joseph Woll a guy that they can trust? He's good when he plays, but he's not healthy. He gets hurt all the time. But the big one is on defense. Why did St. Louis win the Cup? It wasn't because Jordan Binnington went on a hot streak. He did that in the regular season. In the playoffs, their goalie was good, but he wasn't great. It was the defense. It was having guys like Pietrangelo and Colton Parayko and having a much younger Joel Edmondson. And that's why, for me, the big issue isn't necessarily about the new coach. It's about the general manager. It's about Brad Treliving. It's about Shanahan. What moves can they do to change the personnel? Because the Maple Leafs need to improve on defense, and you're not going to do that unless you have to make some dramatic moves to accomplish that.
And when do you think we might hear about those dramatic moves?
I think you're going to have to wait until after the Stanley Cup is done, free agent frenzy in early July. I think that's the next time. Right now, I don't think we're going to hear a lot from Treliving or Shanahan or from the new coach. I think everything is going to be radio silent as now we just get the little whispers and gossip to see if any of the players will agree to be moved.
Okay, TSN Radio's Matt Cause, always appreciate talking to you. Thanks so much for this, and enjoy the day.
Absolutely. Take care.
And thank you for watching CP24 Live at Noon. Coming up after the break, video captured last night shows fireworks being set off near Bloor and Christie. Despite a major police presence in the area, no arrests, no charges laid. We are still waiting to hear back. For more on what happened, stay with us as our coverage continues. More coming up at 1.